Okay, let's dive right in. We're looking at a situation that feels, well, less like a typical diplomatic spat and more like a serious breakdown of trust on the international security front.
Absolutely. And at the heart of it is India's national security advisor, Ajit Doval. We're talking about one of their most senior and most protected officials.
And the really startling part, the thing that makes this deep dive so urgent, is where these threats are coming from.
Exactly. They're explicit, they're public, and they're originating from Canadian soil. Canada, a major democratic ally.
Outrage.
It's a paradox, isn't it? A security threat broadcast openly from a supposed friend.
It really is. And this isn't just, angry words online. It's being treated as a direct security incident.
Yeah.
So our goal today for you, the listener, is to unpack this. We need to understand the players involved, the seriousness of these threats, and why India has basically issued this 30-day ultimatum to Canada.
Yeah, this goes way beyond diplomatic language. It hits at national security, sovereignty, the whole foundation of how allied nations are supposed to interact.
The sources we're drawing from frame this whole thing as a direct challenge to India's sovereignty. The thinking seems to be, look, if our top security guy can be threatened openly from your soil and you do nothing, well, that undermines us.
It does. It sends a message.
So let's trace this back. Where did this specific recent escalation really kick off? It seems to revolve around certain individuals in Canada.
That's right. The immediate flashpoint seems to be the release of a man named Inderjit Singh Gosal from Canadian custody. He's described as a known anti-India figure.
Okay, Gosal. And his background, the charges weren't minor, were they? What makes his release such a big deal in this context?
Not minor at all. He was arrested back in January this year, and the charges were incredibly serious, directly involving aggression against Indian diplomats.
Like what specifically?
We're talking about an alleged attack on the Indian High Commissioner's official home, direct threats against diplomats and even their families, plus, general harassment of the Indian community there. This isn't just vandalism, it's targeting diplomatic presence.
Which really raises the question, doesn't it? If someone's facing charges that serious, directly impacting diplomatic security on Canadian soil, how does he get released? Was it procedural? Political? The material definitely hints it wasn't just routine.
And that's precisely the question that set off alarm bells in New Delhi. The decision itself was questionable enough, given the security implications, but then what happened immediately after his release really solidified India's concerns.
What was that?
The moment Gosal was out, he apparently met straight away with Gurpatwant Singh Penoon.
Ah, Penoon. He's a name that comes up a lot.
Yeah.
Seen as a key figure driving anti-India campaigns from overseas for years, right?
That's him. And this meeting wasn't kept secret. Not at all. Photos of them together popped up almost instantly on social media.
So not exactly subtle.
Far from it. From India's perspective, this wasn't just two guys catching up. It was a very public, very deliberate message. We're back, we're together, and we're stepping things up. It looked like a clear signal to escalate their campaign right after the release.
Okay, and this escalation? It leads directly to the threat against NSA Doval himself. This is where it moves from maybe political protest to something much more dangerous. What exactly did they say?
Well, feeling emboldened, it seems, they issued this direct challenge to Doval publicly. They essentially said, if he thinks he's so big, he should come to Canada. It was meant as a direct taunt, a provocation.
But it wasn't just personal, was it? They tied it to the safety of Indian diplomatic missions. That's a huge step.
That's the strategic core of it, yeah. The most chilling quote reported is something like, Ajit Doval, I am waiting for you. If India wants security for its embassy and consulates, hand Doval over to us. Just think about that for a second.
Well,
They're linking the physical safety of every Indian embassy, consulate, and staff member in Canada directly to India handing over its own intelligence chief. That's not just rhetoric anymore. It sounds like an operational demand with a threat behind it.
right. And if this was just about criminals, maybe India could use other channels. But the real anger, the core grievance here, it seems, isn't just aimed at Gosal and Panin. It's directed at the Canadian government.
That's the absolute crux of the friction. India's outrage is squarely focused on Ottawa. The argument is that a democratic state has a fundamental duty, maybe its first duty, to prevent its territory from being used as a base for terrorist activities or threats against a friendly nation.
And this isn't coming out of nowhere. There's a history here that fuels this mistrust, isn't there?
Definitely not out of the blue. The source material really emphasizes past commitments. Apparently, the Canadian Prime Minister, other senior ministers, they'd previously given assurances. Promises to crack down on these specific anti-India Khalistani activities and, importantly, to increase security for Indian missions after earlier incidents.
So from India's point of view, what actually happened was the exact opposite of what was promised.
That's the argument, yes. The analysis suggests security wasn't boosted. And then, this key individual, Ghosal, someone already accused of serious acts against diplomats, was let back out. That's seen in Delhi as a major failure of commitment, maybe even bad faith.
The analogy used in the source material to explain the level of distrust is quite powerful. It helps frame why India's move to an ultimatum rather than just, more diplomatic notes.
Yeah, it's a stark analogy, but it gets the point across about why trust has collapsed. Imagine, right? Someone is outside your house, they're shouting threats at your family, maybe throwing things, maybe even getting physical.
Okay.
You call the authorities, in this case, the host government, Canada. They detain the person briefly. But then, knowing full well what they were doing, they release them almost immediately.
And the moment they're free, they're back, maybe even bolder, threatening your family's protector specifically.
Exactly. In that scenario, who are you angrier at? The person making the threats, sure. But also, crucially, at the authorities who let them go free to continue the threats. That's how India seems to view Canada in this situation. They're asking, how can we trust you to protect our people, our embassies, if you release the very person threatening them?
Which puts the focus squarely back on the target, NSA Doval. Threatening him isn't random. It's calculated to maximize the impact, to challenge India's security structure itself.
Yeah.
Let's quickly recap why Doval is such a significant figure.
Right. Doval isn't just another official. He's known internationally for his strategic thinking and, let's say, his firmness. He's seen as the key mind behind some of India's most significant recent security operations.
Can you give us some examples? What specific actions make him such a target?
Well, the sources point to him being the architect of India's surgical strike strategy in Pakistan. That was a major policy shift. And also the planner behind the Balakot airstrike. He's essentially the face of India's operational response to cross-border terrorism.
So threatening him openly from Canadian soil, it's not just personal. It's a symbolic stab at India's entire intelligence and security capability.
Absolutely. The goal seems pretty clear. Try to undermine India's image, make its security apparatus look vulnerable, show that even its top official can be threatened with impunity from an allied country. The implications for international cooperation are pretty serious.
Which circles back to Canada's response, or perhaps lack of response.
Right.
While Pan and Ghosal are out there making threats, holding rallies, putting up posters, Ottawa's silence is noted.
And that silence, from India's perspective, is the core problem. It leaves them concluding one of two things. Either Canada is simply too weak to control these elements on its own soil, or it's choosing not to act. Willful inaction, basically turning a blind eye.
Which is seen as tacitly tolerating threats against a partner nation.
Precisely. And that perceived tolerance is what's led to this very sharp diplomatic move. The ultimatum. India's decided quiet diplomacy isn't working.
Okay, the ultimatum. A 30-day period. That's very direct language between allies. What concrete actions is India demanding within that time frame?
The demands are quite specific, focusing on legal and security steps. India wants, well, expects, tangible action against these operatives, meaning arrests, charges, putting them back in jail. They also want the organizations linked to them banned. And critically, verifiable improvements to the security protecting Indian embassies and consulates in Canada. The clock is ticking on those items.
So the big question then, what happens if these 30 days pass and Canada hasn't taken what India considers concrete action? What levers can India pull?
The sources suggest India is prepared for several steps, likely escalating. First, diplomatic pressure ramps up significantly. Think about public condemnation at major international forums. The UN, the G20 are mentioned specifically. That's about isolating Canada on the issue of counterterrorism cooperation.
And economically, there's a substantial trade relationship there.
Yes, that's a major potential lever.